What's going on, guys? It is the 15th of March, and we were supposed to have Patrick on last week, but I was in Mexico making a deal down there. I won't share what that deal is right now. I'll wait till everything's 100% inked. Then you guys can hear about some other crazy crap that happened to be digging myself into. So Patrick and I have been talking about the last couple of weeks and the stuff that's influenced the market and what it does to you as far as the real estate investor and interest rates. And one of the big things that he was just hammering me with text the day we're supposed to talk that we didn't talk, all about the old jobs report. So welcome back, Patrick. I appreciate you getting on here all the time, and always the information you have to bring is top end, man. Thank you.
Yeah, no, again, thanks for having me, brother. I'm glad to be here.
Always, always. So let's get into that jobs report, that revision. That's freaking crazy. You know, we got people out there in DC. That's all they are done. They're just paid to sit there and stare at shit, or New York, or wherever the hell they're at. Just stare at these numbers. Just collect data, and then what do they end up with? Give us a rundown, bro.
Yeah, so what a lot of consumers don't understand is when those jobs reports have their initial release, they then experience revisions for the next 6 months, right? So they come back and recalculate, and sometimes those revisions are 20, 30,000 jobs, sometimes 50,000. It's nothing tremendously aggressive. But if you go back to January's jobs report, right? So the market was anticipating having, and that came out February the 2nd, is what you and I are talking about. Is the market was expecting 180,000 jobs created in January, and we got that slamming 353,000 report. We showed it the last time that we were here, that massive candlestick of where bond prices lost a tremendous amount of value, causing interest rates to climb back up. And it was kind of started that whole roll from the reduction we had from November all the way to the end of the year, kind of got erased. And that was the original starter of all of this. But then, we come back in for March here. We were doing February's jobs report. The market was looking for 200,000 jobs created, and we got 275, which on the surface seemed, fairly aggressive. But then this revision happened where they said, hey, oops, instead of that 353, it was actually 229. So it was a 52% miss to the original report. And where that becomes significant is, I think you and I can both agree, if you're expecting 180 and you get 229, you're going to see a little bit of a clip, but it's not going to be much. It's not near what you would experience at 353 on that big of a miss. So, I mean, it's unbelievable that it can be off by that much.
I wouldn't say unbelievable, personally. I would say freaking cooked. Because I have been saying, I've been jumping up and down, screaming after you get into the markets and understand them a little bit more, how easily manipulated things can be, and how what is put out in the headline. Here's what I believe. This is just Aaron Chapman's belief. You guys can all call me out and say I'm full of shit. But what you put out in the headline moves the market. What you put in the revision usually is in the back of the newspaper, where people really don't pay attention, and you can correct what you could have intentionally done. I'm not saying they're intentionally doing this, but they could have intentionally done this. But when you start looking at everything that's happening, taking it from a global perspective, start seeing how all the reaction is from the quantitative easing part. I mean, just literally the crash, quantitative easing, to where we're at today with inventory versus who's buying it and who's owning it, and then what's going to happen with the actual cost of it, as well as the monthly expense. We start seeing all that. It's kind of hard not to start calculating the fact that there's some manipulation going on in a rather big way. Back of the room shit that we don't get to see up front, because the headline, it shows one thing, the back of the book shows something else. Any thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to it. You hate to put it out, but obviously that the number one basis that the current administration has been touting, right, and holding on to is the jobs market, the labor strength. It's been their entire talking point, almost the entire presidency. So to have this kind of a miss, and again, a 52% whammy is a big miss. It kind of makes you scratch your head a little bit, right?
And that's the other thing. It's not the only time in the last couple of years we've seen this shit happen, actually in bigger scale than what we saw before, right? Did you ever see anything in the past that had this big a scale of miss?
No, I mean, not to this point, not at 52%. I mean, that was,
52. We saw another one is like 20 some odd percent and 30 some odd percent, which is still freaking big. But when you go back before, I mean, I'm not trying to point out just specific administration is at fault, but when you go before that, we saw misses, but not misses, right? So it goes to what you're sitting here saying. there's those up there trying to claim how great it is up from the new policies and whatever crap that's helping the American get jobs, when in reality it's not. It's complete jerk off information, and it has been from the very, very beginning. And then we start to see evidence here to show how much that belief could be accurate. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was reading an economist the other day who kind of went through all of the data, and he claims that we've lost 289,000 jobs in 2023. That the majority, I think it was 997,000 of the jobs that were created are considered a part-time job, right? Because when you and I talked about this in the past, that the average hours worked, used to be 40 was a full-time job. And now all of a sudden we're trending all the way down to 32 being considered full-time. And if you have two 32-hour jobs or something remotely close to that, it's considered two full-time jobs. But when he goes through the math, the majority of everything that we've seen as an economy has been Americans who are struggling to make ends meet, that have gotten multiple part-time jobs, that are working the same hour equivalent as a full-time job, and those are counting towards the numbers.
Again, a lot of manipulation of the facts to equal what they want to be. It's like when we got into inflation, everybody talks about how they're looking at what the CPI says, but when you start really understanding the CPI, that stack of metrics for that particular index isn't truly reflective of the economy. We also know that they've done substitution. Like if you used to eat filet, well, guess what? Now you can go into sirloin. Well, no, you can still eat off of flank steak. Well, then you can go into chicken. Well, then you go into burger. They're still saying that you're eating your portion, but they're changing and substituting what it is to say that inflation's staying stable when it isn't. And we all know that everybody watches the CPI, the PCE, the PPI, all those inflation metrics, or at least those indexes, to give us an idea of what's going to happen to the mortgage-backed securities, right? What's going to happen with the interest rates? And is the Fed going to lower the rates? And everybody was counting on 4 Fed lowers this year. Well, then as we get closer to the beginning of 2024, it's like, going to be 3 Fed lowers. Now what are we staring at, bro? What are you seeing out there with the PPI and the CPI and the PCE and all that shit?
Easy, bud. So it was 7. It was 6 to 7 is what the markets were betting on through the CME group and their projections, right? So then you kind of start to wonder, these are really smart people that are putting these projections out, right? They're far more intelligent than you and I. They have structured algorithms that are putting everything together. So then you want to think in the back of your minds, what were their models coming up with in order to say all of this, right? And so it's starting to believe that those models were far more accurate than the data that has transitioned us to this point. And what were they seeing, right? Which means that whatever they were seeing in October is still here today, right? It's just, when is it going to show itself? Now, of course, after that jobs report, we fell right into another month of the consumer price index for the second month in a row. Month over month, core inflation grew 0.4%. We're still blaming owner's equivalent rent. So that was that big May 12th thing that was missed last year from the other group, right? Was that the consumer price index was going to change based upon how shelter and rents were calculated. In the past, it's always been an average of rents, and sometimes those rents were lease agreements that were written 12 months ago. Now it was new leases, and now there's kind of a combination between the two of those. But from what I could see in this CPI report was, food away from home was a big hit. Food at home was a big hit. Used car prices were another big hit. So there were other contributing factors, and owner's equivalent rent actually fell, right? And we still got 2 4/10, growth months in a row, which tells us that there may still be a problem here.
I think there's a much bigger problem than what everybody wants to admit to. And every time we look at it, start seeing something higher than what they anticipated. And what do you think is and here's the other thing, guys. Remember, the market coming into 2024 is anticipating and built into it in the thought process of where they're going to go, where they're going to trade, that we're going to get 3 rate drops from the Fed. Now, doesn't directly correlate to our interest rates, but does have an effect on our interest rates. So if we don't get those 3 drops, what is going to happen? It's not going to be what everybody thinks is going to happen. There's a lot of people holding out right now saying, well, I'll get my loans, or I'll pay cash and I'll refinance so the rates go down. You're foolish. Right now, from what I'm seeing, CPI, PCE, PPI, all misses, all significant misses. Therefore, inflation's hotter than what they thought it was going to be, at least
the worst, right? Yeah.
much worse than what they thought it would be. And the Fed said, if we can get it closer to the 2%, we will start tapering and lowering their interest rate. They're not gonna now. There's nothing that gives, there's nothing that we see in any of these readings. And we all know these readings are cooked to look better than reality. So I don't know that Powell and the rest of the Fed is going to say, yeah, we're going to lower these rates. We may not see one at all this year. Do you think that's a potential?
Powell did say that. So he was on the Hill last week. He was in front of the House on Wednesday, the Senate on Thursday. And he stated many times that he felt that the Fed, that if everything went right, the Fed would be in a position to cut rates towards the end of the year, but premised that right now the data does not support it. And each time the Fed minutes come out, the Fed's saying the same thing within their Fed meetings of, it's premature at this point that the data is not evidencing a need for interest rate reduction, because it's important for everybody on this to understand is the Fed's going to pull back when economic conditions begin to soften, right? So they don't want the economy to kind of fall off a cliff, right? And growth to fall off a cliff. So they want to kind of trickle this back, but they're not going to trickle until there's evidence that the economy is softening. So with jobs high, with inflation high, with prices high, their main goal, and Powell says this 100 times when he gets beat up on the Hill, when some new congressman wants to beat him up about mortgage rates, and he will tell you, our job is price control and job growth. That's all we're here to do. And whatever negative impacts come as a result of that, that is what you have hired us to do. And that's what we are going to do. And he has made it very clear that they are data dependent. And until that data points in that direction, they're going to hold steady.
I think one of the bigger problems that we have as a structure, economic structure, is the instant gratification thing that we got going on here. People will not stop spending damn money. Because of that, there's been no savings discipline. There's been no budgeting discipline. There's been no financial discipline whatsoever in the vast majority of people. And the way they feel better about themselves is click that button on Amazon. And sometimes you never even use the shit. You just own it and put it somewhere. Because of that, and people won't stop spending, we can't get, and it's impossible to get inflation under control. So allowing this, the way that people have been educated on finances, the way that our education system is operated, and never focusing on how to really get the human mind to think correctly about this, that's part of the, in my opinion, part of the reason why all this stuff is out of hand. So here's the bottom line here, guys, is I don't see, and Patrick, it sounds like he's kind of backing me up here. We may not see our interest rates get anywhere near where you want them to go. And I'm going to get into the charts real quick here because, this is getting long, but it's all good data. Plus, we're making up for a time that we missed last week. Right. But again, we have that big ass barrier that I keep talking about there from the day they announced quantitative easing that continues to be that massive, massive wall ahead. But look what we've had here this week. A lot the negative news has been pushing us into a point where we're now seeing interest rates take that beating, heading down to what looks like a couple of good solid support lines here, but whether or not they'll hold, we'll find out. Any thoughts on the chart that we should be staring at?
So when you go back there to those two candles that you and I were talking about previous to, so rates had fallen. When you get up to the yellow line there, we were at 6.6%. And then that jobs report for January came out, and then the CPI was that next candle. So once you hit those two, I mean, we've almost completely erased all of the gain that we established in the aftermath of this. So all the negative news supposedly that came out in the aftermath of that January jobs report, but now we've hit the
all back up here from that January jobs report, getting it right there, and then bam, now we got the
February and February CPI there. So I mean, we keep just having this seesaw battle back, and exactly what you talked about, your yellow line right there has created a structure that until there is another announcement, I don't know that we break that.
And the announcement, as we can see here, this was all good mortgage. This is all MBS favorable news all through this window of time, all the way back from the October 23rd, all the way till we hit the 27th of December. And we had really still friendly news until we hit this part here. But none of it was friendly enough to get past this line. This line is all created quantitative easing before and quantitative easing after. Everything post-quantitative easing went above that. Pre-quantitative easing was below that. So I think it's going to take trillions of dollars from the Fed to actually break that. That's my thought. Don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if that's going to be the only thing that gets us past that. But if that's the case, guys, lock your shit. Period. Lock it. You got 30-year fixed. Warren Buffett says the greatest financial instrument in history because it's a one-way bet. If rates do go down someday, you refinance if that's what makes you feel good. I think it's stupid, but go ahead. And if it doesn't go down, you've locked that rate for 30 years. You're winning. So final thoughts, and I'll get you take final thoughts, and we're out.
Yeah, I mean, the number one hedge against inflation in the United States is a 30-year fixed mortgage, right? Because as inflation grows, wages grow along with it, and the debt remains fixed and structured. So yeah, I think it's important to stop focusing on once in a lifetime interest rates and come to the reality of what interest rates have been through the encompass of a 60-year time frame.
And so, yeah, I gave you a final thought, but also add to that final thought, the hedge against inflation, the 30-year fixed, because everything else can go up, but that payment stays the same, but you're paying it back with a deflating instrument like the US dollar. Get my damned app so you can see that and calculate yourself. You never pay back what you borrowed, even when you pay it for 30 years. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you, and we'll see you on Tuesday.
Have a great day, guys.